Hello and welcome to part 5 of the Storywriting Social with me, Simon Hall, as we continue our journey through the letters of the alphabet, every single one, trying to learn all we can, all we need about story writing and storytelling. And so on we go to letter N. Any guesses what N stands for? And don't forget, you can pause at any time just to have a guess. I'll give you a clue here. It's a very fundamental part of story writing and telling. However, this is a cryptic clue. Any guesses? I'll give you the answer. N is narrative. Why are you looking at some electricity pylons, you might well ask? Well, it's my way of imagining how a story unfolds. Imagine you start off your story really well, very interesting indeed. Something amazing just happened to me, you might say. And you've got a really good end to your story, some big sting in the tail. Trouble is, if the start and the end are your pylons, and then the narrative, the electricity wire between them, has got nothing to hold it up in between, then it just flops on down. It gets really flaccid and dull and dreary and boring. We don't stay with it. However, if you have lots of pylons, as you can see in the picture, holding up the narrative flow, it's all taut and pacey and action-packed, which means, hopefully, it keeps your interest, keeps things going along. So that's how I see narrative. And a quick example of that, a silly one. How about if I show you something called the writer's study trail? Now this is to find your way to the most important place to spend time as a writer. It's not the pub. I imagine some of you are thinking that already, not the pub. This is the most important place for a writer to spend time if they want to be a success. So that's my start, my pylon, hopefully grabs your interest, makes you want to find out more. I'm going to take you towards the end, but the series of developments, the towers that hold up my narrative, are a series of clues which will take you to items in a writer's study, and you've got to solve the clues. So clue number 1. This helps bring a rich mix to our writing. It's the boss of any meeting, and the answer is 5 letters long. By all means, pause if you want to have a think about it. Is there a clue in the first line which might help you? Is it confirmed by the second line? The answer is chair. Chair, because mix of a rich is chair, and the boss of any meeting confirms that. So that's development number 1, our first pylon to keep our narrative going. What about this one? Deep inside, you hope not to get a rejection for your latest submission for publication. It's said to be mightier than any rapier. 3 letters. Again, pause if you need to have a moment for a quick think. And the answer is pen. Pen, because deep inside, there's the clue. Inside hope not, there's pen, and mightier than any rapier or sword, pen. So we continue in our odyssey. A pen is an essential tool for a writer, but it's funny how often its nib can lead you back here. If it was a person, it'd be annoying because he's full of rubbish. 3 letters again. Any thoughts? Well, look at part 1 of the clue. Is there something backwards, which will give you the answer? And annoying because he's full of rubbish. Well, yes, it's bin. You're absolutely right. Moving on in our series of developments. Do, mi, fa, sol, la. You've got it already, haven't you? The foundation of the English nation. What is it? It's T, of course. Finally then, to the reveal, the big reveal. Where is the most important place to spend time if you want to be a successful writer? It goes like this. It begins with an I, this land of elation. It could be, but it's not. Inspiration. Equally, it could be, but it's not. Innovation. But it certainly is about creation, and it rhymes with all 3, which makes it 11 letters. Pause if you want to have a think about it for a second. The answer, of course, is imagination. So that's the bold theory, if you like. A really interesting start, hopefully, to get you involved in my story. A satisfactory end like that, but critically a series of developments to keep you interested. My clues in the writer's study trail. However, that is a very straight and bland and bold description of how story writing goes. There is a little bit more to it than that. You won't be surprised to know. So let me show you this. This is a picture of myself, aged 14. Sorry if it's scary. I'm the one at the back there, by the way. Some friends and I reenacting the cover of The Who's My Generation album, I think. Why am I saying this is about my first love? Well, aged 14, stay with me through this story, because this is a story, a great story about love. Aged 14, I was in an English class with a lovely teacher called Mrs. Osler, who was wonderful, passionate, so committed to her subject, so knowledgeable, a real old hippie with lots of flowing clothes and beads. Great, wonderful woman. She was doing an English class with us, can't remember what about, but our homework that night was to write a story about my first love. And I said, oh no, got to write homework. And on top of that, it's about love. Oh. Anyway, I think we had about a week to do it. So the days passed and I couldn't think of anything to write about. I didn't really want to do it. I thought, oh no. And eventually, of course, I wrote the story and I handed it in. And the next time we had a class, something rather strange happened, to say the least. Mrs. Osler was being kind to us, as she was, and saying, oh, you wrote some great stories about your first love. Some of you wrote some lovely stories. But there is one person in here who wrote the most beautiful, brilliant, creative, original story. Stand up, Simon. And I thought, uh-oh, this is not going to be good. Because when I was asked to stand up in school, I wasn't a great kid. It was rarely a good thing. And she said that I had written the best, the most creative, the most wonderful story. And everybody was looking at me. And then she revealed that my story was about music. Music was my first love. And everybody else had written about boys or girls, but mine was about music. And the reason I tell you that is because hopefully it shows you how storytelling works, an interesting start, a satisfying ending, lots of developments in between. But also that, I think, may have been the first time I had any inkling that I could make a career from the world of words. And what a wonderful career it's been as well. The point of that is, see how the story develops. And this is a classic storytelling structure. Set the scene, me at school, Mrs. Osler, doing the English class. Then we move on to the problem, often known as the inciting incident. Something happens which gives our hero, in this case me, a problem to solve, which is the story about my first love. Rising action, the tension goes and goes and goes as I don't know what to write and we get near the deadline. Climax, well, we have the reveal about what actually happens, what I do write. And then this step, which is important, resolution. Sometimes I think of this as echoes down the corridor, how it changes the person involved, what it means. And for me, that, of course, is a career in writing. And there you see it in graphic form. Set the scene, exposition, problem, rising action, climax, the reveal, what I've written about, and the resolution, the echoes down the corridor. Something else I should mention in terms of story writing and telling is this, character arcs. You see the 4 characters from The Wizard of Oz, or the main characters there. Anyway, it's really important that not just you have a story and lots happening in it, but actually the characters are changed by it. It means something to them. They learn, they grow, something changes along the way. And of course, here are some classic examples. Well, Dorothy, she shows resolution and calm and fortitude getting back to Kansas. But what does the Scarecrow find along the way? What's his challenge? Well, of course, he finds himself, he says, trying to remember. The Scarecrow, what did the Scarecrow have? Oh, the Scarecrow was a brain, wasn't it? The brain for the Scarecrow. The Tin Man, of course, he had to find a heart. And the Lion, his courage. So along the way, the character should change as well. And see how that works in your story too, like it did in my first love story. I was changed because a whole avenue of opportunity was opened up to me I'd never known before. So moving on in our journey, O, our next letter, O. Any guesses what O might stand for? Any guesses at all? It's a tricky one. I'm not sure this clue is going to help much. Have a pause if you need to think. And O is O, or what do I mean by O? I mean twists. Twists are really, really important in story writing or telling. And they become famous. They become part of the most famous stories we know, and sometimes they influence them becoming very famous stories because we love them so much. And we sometimes forget they're even there. What, for example, is a twist at the end of The Wizard of Oz? We forget, don't we? You remember what it is? It's the wizard that we've been taught to fear throughout this entire story. This all-powerful wizard turns out to be nothing more than a little old man using a machine. And even better, that is revealed by one of the lowest creatures in the story, the dog. And see how twists can become so important in terms of making stories last down the years. For example, guess these twists. One of the best loved of black and white films, a tale of lost love against the Second World War backdrop of chaotic Morocco. Of all the gingites and all the towns and all the world, she walks in the mine. As the denouement nears and Rick, Ilster and Laszlo gather at the airport, there must surely be a happy ending, surely. What's the film? Pause if you need to have a think about it. Yeah, it's Casablanca. And of course, it's a twist because it's a love story. And we're expecting a happy ending, but perhaps not quite that way. What about this one? 3 astronauts survive an ill-fated mission, crash on a strange planet run by monkeys. They find an advanced culture, but one in which humans are hunted or enslaved. In one of the most iconic final scenes of a film, on a walk along a beach, we discover the ruined remains of the Statue of Liberty. What's that? Scary end. Have a think about that if you want to. Yeah, Planet of the Apes. And throughout the entire film, we expect it to be an alien planet because it's run by apes. But at the end, it's revealed to be the Earth, and we have destroyed it. And of course, that's a big twist because at the time, about 1968, I think, there was great fear of nuclear Armageddon. So what a powerful twist. One of my absolute favorites. What about this one? 10 strangers invited to an island by an unknown host and are stunned by being accused of having escaped punishment for their dreadful crimes, cut off from the world with nowhere to run. One by one, they're killed. Despite their frantic efforts, the survivors fail to uncover the culprit. With the panic rising, at least we know the sole surviving person must be the killer, don't we? Do we? What's that? Have a think. Pause if you need to. Yeah, Agatha Christie, and then there were none. Of course, that defies logic. The last person must be the killer. Oh no, not in Agatha world. Finally, explosions, multiple murder on a ship, police can't find a motive. 5 criminals arrested for a police identity parade, use the meeting to hatch a plot. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Film haunted by the legendary Kaiser Soze. An example, we can't even trust the narrator. Who's that? What's that? Great film. If you haven't seen it, well worth it. The Usual Suspects. Absolutely terrific films. And they live in the memory partly because the twists are so clever, so memorable. So how do we do twists? A quick rundown. Well, you can do a defying of the expectations. That's like Great Expectations, Dickens' classic. We're expecting all along Pip's benefactor to be Miss Havisham. Who is it really? I won't do a spoiler, but beautiful storytelling, not what we expect. Confound convention, that's the Romeo and Juliet twist, because of course we're expecting the lovers to get together in the end, and it doesn't quite turn out that way. Tweak the nose of logic. That's when the Agatha Christie twist comes in. The last remaining person must be the killer. Oh no, but it has to be credible. The clues have to be there, as they are. And finally, the unreliable narrator, the person who's telling you the story you tend to deliver your heart and trust to. You can't always trust them. So that's the Usual Suspects type twist. Okay, final letter for our session today. P. Any guesses what P is? Simple mechanics of writing. So we'll do this briefly. I'll give you a clue there. It's another really cryptic clue. It's a bad one, I'm sorry. While you're looking at the World Wide Web, the World Wide Web, the internet has changed the way people write, the fashion for writing. P is simple. It's about paragraphs. The modern fashion in writing, it's worth knowing about. There's nothing in writing which is a rule. You can do things your own way. But there is a trend in writing at the moment about the way to write and the way not to write. And I'll illustrate that with quick reference to a couple of famous authors of the past. Modern writing, for example. Who wrote this paragraph? It's commonly said that no man was ever converted by argument, but there is a single one which will make any Laodicean in England, let him be once lovesick, wear prayer books, and become a zealous Episcopalian, the argument that his sweetheart can be seen from his pew. Any guesses? Pause if you need to. Thomas Hardy. That's Thomas Hardy. It's a paragraph which takes a bit of unwrapping. You have to read it a few times, maybe get your dictionary out to work out what it means. I think he's trying to say that someone might not be keen to go to church, but if the person they fancy is there, they'll go quite happily. Contrast that with the style of another writer, a very famous writer. I'm clear enough in the head, he thought, too clear. I'm as clear as the stars that are my brothers. Think about bullfighting, whiskey, Cuba. Yeah, you got it. Ernest Hemingway. Which of those two styles do you think works best for the modern world? It's certainly the latter, absolutely the latter. Even beautiful works, complex, thoughtful works like the Hilary Mantel books. Notice how short the sentences tend to be. And that's, I think, a consequence of the World Wide Web. When people have short attentions, they need to take information quite quickly. There are no rules, but the latter there tends to be the best way of doing things. And here's a quick exercise for you. It's a fun one. Something an academic might say. What are they trying to say there in just one simple sentence? Allow me to venture a thought. Others may disagree. Competing viewpoints. Can be argued that, even in the context of other great institutions around the world, University of Cambridge could be the very highest of all, blah, 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 blah. What's he trying to say? Pause for a second if you need to think about it. Yeah, I think you got it. He's trying to say that I think Cambridge is the best. But of course he couldn't say it that simply. So that is part 5 of the Storywriting Social. We've got N, narrative, how to set out your story. Good start, good end, series of developments. But remember the subtlety of it, how you set it out, and the rising action, the climax, and the resolution, the echoes down the corridor, what it means. Also, of course, character arcs. People should change through the story. Twists are really important. See if you can come up with a good twist. And paragraphs, your writing style. That's it for part 5. Hope to see you on Thursday evening. But for now, goodbye.